such a great turnout for this program. I'm Leslie Shearstone, one of the counselors here at Cope High School, and with Beth's help and all of these folks on the stage tonight, we're very glad to have so many good folks here to learn about this very important topic of human trafficking. I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick intro. We have, as they were saying, Al Smith is going to be coming to Pope on the 21st of April during lunch periods. Al, do you want to stand up and just wave at everyone? This is Al, and this is Cindy. She will also be here on that date, and we will have a program for the students for learning about how to present themselves to employers and to colleges during, and they can sign up for that using this QR code, and we have these around the building, and the teachers are going to make announcements about this tomorrow in their advisement. So if they can go ahead and just sign up using the QR code so we know how many to expect and all that would be awesome. We can hold about 20-ish kids in the room. We're going to be having this presentation. So, but if we get a huge turnout, that'd be even better. We'll figure out a different place to have it if we have to. All right, I'll be here, and we appreciate you making your time for that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick overview of our event and our topics and our guests. Hopefully students, you got to put your name in a little basket to be included in a drawing for some gift cards to Clean Juice. So we have 10 gift cards to Clean Juice to give out to you at the end of the program. So we will hopefully, you have to be present to win, so stay there. Then we have, I'm going to go ahead and just go down the line and do a quick introduction. Cindy Spuznik is founder and CEO To My Place. After volunteering at many numerous shelters focusing on young adults, she realized her fears, hopes, and dreams weren't being addressed, and her goal was to teach life skills so young adults could live more productive lives. Cindy and Misty Dean, who is down, if you want to wave real quick. This is her assistant. She were very instrumental in being able to partner with myself and with Beth Moore to coordinate the event and get these amazing speakers that we have for tonight. So we appreciate your efforts for that. I'm going to go ahead and let you do an intro, and then I'll go through the rest of y'all, and then we'll go ahead and start the slideshow.
Welcome. Welcome to parents, students, teachers, administrators, PTA volunteers, other concerned and committed folks, and friends and family. I applaud you for spending this time to join us this evening to learn more about this very difficult subject. I am a woman, a mother, the leader of a nonprofit that cares for young people, and a person who cares about her community. I learned about sex trafficking from the very people who have experienced it right here in our community. I am here to testify that it's real and that you are justified in putting aside this time to spend with us tonight. I guess in some ways, I'm an activist on behalf of our children, your children. Because I have seen firsthand the devastation of the very real problem that many just don't even believe it happens here, I can personally attest to the fact that trafficking is here. It's local, it's national, it's international. I have met, hugged, loved, and even lost victims. That is why I welcome you to tonight. We need fewer victims. You are here because you care and you want to learn, and I applaud every one of you for that. And you will learn from this amazing panel of experts. You will gain awareness and be enlightened by those who are truly knowledgeable and experienced in this area. You will hear that this is not a faraway problem. It is not something that cannot happen here. You will be more educated and empowered. You will be able to get your questions answered. You too can be a bit of an activist by keeping your eyes open and by knowing what to do should you see something. As they say at the airport, see something, say something. In that way, I promise you, you will save a life, or at the very least, change a life. Thank you for committing to this time tonight. Thank you for being among those who care enough to learn something, to do something, and to be someone who makes a difference by being informed. Coming here to join us tonight is a big step, and thank you all very much for taking that.
Yes, give me a round of applause. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce all of our panel members, and then we're going to start the slideshow. We're going to start with a video. But I do want to just put a little segue, knowing that we do have a lot of young people here in our audience, and this is a very sensitive topic. But know that if you do find yourself, at any time uncomfortable, you can obviously leave. But I think by staying and listening and learning, you will come away feeling like you are equipped to help and to be an advocate and not be, in a position to be in a victimized situation. So I just want to mention that. All right. So Faith is our next panel member. Faith Cadona. She is a subject matter expert in the field of human trafficking, and she's one of the founding members of the Street Grace Survival Advisory Council, and has served for at least 6 years on the council. Street Grace mobilizes community resources. They have financial, human, and material resources to fight commercial sexual exploitation of children, and through prevention, protection, and policy pursuit. So she will start our talk about what human trafficking is. And then the next speaker we'll have is Janice Johnson. Janice is a national legal advocate and survivor leader of Her Song. Her Song was created to help women who are survivors of human trafficking with residential support and programs to help women move from a survival-based existence to purposeful self-sufficient living. And Janice is a survivor and will be sharing her story with us. Then after her, this is Tracy Hurley. She is with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. She's a program coordinator, prevention, and training specialist for the Stephanie D. Blank Center for Safe and Healthy Children at the CHOA. And her role will be to discuss prevention, especially risk factors and internet safety. And while I'm thinking about it, just so you know, we will be posting this PowerPoint on our school counseling page. We'll be sharing the link to this so that if you would like to refer back to it anytime, share with your family, friends, or wherever, we will be sharing that in our newsletters and things, so you know. Lastly, Jennifer Hassel here at the end is project director for Project Intersect at the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy in Atlanta. Jennifer has over 25 years of social work experience with extensive knowledge of child advocacy centers, child welfare practice, trauma-informed care, and systems change. Her role with Project Intersect, Jennifer has developed partnerships with multiple statewide agencies serving youth and families who have experienced trauma and exploitation. And her role will be to discuss how to respond if something's happened, what to do, who to call, and to have some emergency contact information provided for you at our tables before you leave that you can take with you. So at this point, at the end when we're finished, if you have questions you would like to ask the panel, you will just raise your hands. We did have some little QR codes at the back on the table if you wanted to submit anything anonymously. I can pull those off of my phone here. And at the end, if you do have any questions or would just like to speak individually with one of the presenters, they'll be here shortly for a few minutes afterwards. You can ask some questions and make a contact, but they have their information out there and you can contact them afterwards. Obviously, feel free to pick up any of the materials that we have up front. So we're here, we'll go ahead and we'll start with the video, and then we will go ahead and let our speakers proceed.
The first time I was sold for sex, I was taken to a big house. Other girls are sitting there crying, and you could hear girls screaming upstairs. And I mean, I kind of had an idea at that point that I was going to get hurt. I did nothing to deserve this. At 4.5 years old, I was lured from our front yard, our neighbor in our community. We were held there overnight, or we were sexually and mentally abused. I thought that my neighbors were like my protectors. My community wasn't safe anymore to me, period.
Every year, up to 3,600 kids are sold for sex in the state of Georgia. But that's just a number on a piece of paper. It's easily thrown away. It's easily written off as a statistic. And it doesn't really affect us that much. Many times you hear the statement that number can't be real. But it is. And we're going to show you in a way that's too big for us to continue to ignore. bus out now, but now we're singing the lake.
Now, this is Chopper 46 video of a caravan of school buses. The group that put this on, called Street Grace, came together to speak out against this awful practice.
Human trafficking is a here problem wherever here is for you. The majority of sex trafficking that occurs is our children who are being bought and sold by members of our community. We can stop it. It does not have to happen to any child. My wife and I have 2 daughters, and I just cannot imagine this happening to them. And if it was happening to them, I would just hope somebody would step up and help. Human trafficking is the fastest growing, second largest illegal business on the planet. The 72 yellow school buses that are assembled here today, each representing 50 of Georgia's children, are a difficult reminder that these statistics represent lives. Being that my city is associated with such a horrible crime.
I feel like too many people just bypass things when they can really actually do something to help.
We remain committed to preventing any child from ending up in such a horrific nightmare and to rescuing those who may already be involved.
I hope that this opens people's eyes when they see those numbers going around with buses. They think of the kids in their lives.
I'm here to tell you, it is a long road to recovery, and no child deserves to have to experience something like this.
It is a very hard topic to talk about. If you do not have this conversation with your children, somebody else is.
It's a significant event in the life of Atlanta to be able to rise up one city, one voice, one cause. You just have to be willing to step into the conversation and engage with kids.
Kids need to know that they can't say no, that they have boundaries, and they need to feel like they're going to be believed if something does happen, because if they have nobody to go to, they're not going to say anything.
When we're talking about one of our most vulnerable populations, children, we don't have just a legal obligation, we have a moral obligation as well.
Nobody else is gonna come.
That's why I lift my voice to make sure that we keep our children safe.
Doing what I do now and being able to help others is the only thing that makes my story worth it. Don't sit back and do nothing because you feel like the problem is too big and you can't make enough of a difference. Because you can. The first time.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn this over to David Cadona, who is from Street Grace.
Hi, like she said, my name is Faith, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what human trafficking is, so that you know how to spot it in your communities, in your schools, in your churches, in your businesses, because it is a here problem. It is everywhere. So human trafficking is a crime that occurs when a trafficker uses force, fraud, or coercion to control another person for the purposes of engaging in a commercial sex act or soliciting labor services against his or her will. And it happens in three different areas. Human trafficking is the overarching one that sex and labor trafficking fall under, and then you have CSEC, the commercial sexual exploitation of children. In order to prove force or fraud or coercion in the state of Georgia, any minor under the age of 18, you don't have to prove it. So if a child's boyfriend, like an older boyfriend, or they're 14 and this one's 17, or they're 12 and this one's 15, if that 15-year-old boyfriend coerces his girlfriend into any type of sex act for money, that's immediately illegal. And it doesn't matter if they're both minors or if he's 18 and she's 12. It's illegal, and there is no element that has to be proven in the state of Georgia for force, fraud, or coercion. Yep. I'm used to people talking back, so everybody looks kind of like, I don't know what to do. So I'll throw a little humor in there for you. The federal law is a little bit different than Georgia state law, than most state laws. It's defined sex trafficking as the recruitment, harboring, transporting, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting a person for the purposes of commercial sex. The force, fraud, and coercion element is still there, except for when they're under the age of 18. So any child in this room that was engaged or someone engaged in a commercial sex act, it would be considered a crime, and no one had to prove that it actually happened. It would really be just a testimony that would be needed. So the warning signs, some of you guys may have already seen this. I know I was having a conversation with some kids in the school yesterday, and we were talking about sexting and sextortion, and a lot of them, their faces just had this really surprised look on their face because they already knew people who were involved in some of this. And so, significantly, what a boyfriend. If your child is 12 years old and their boyfriend is 18, there's a problem. And there's a conversation that needs to be had, right? If they consistently run away, where are they going? Right? They're not just going down the street to a friend's house. They're going somewhere. Someone has enticed them from school. They've enticed them from a soccer game or a baseball game or a track meet. I know there's a track meet happening right now. Oftentimes, traffickers are within the schools. Sometimes they're teachers, sometimes they're counselors, sometimes they're people who just hang out at the schools to try to entice your child to run away from home. They're looking at them online. They're wanting to know what kid is posting everything public on their social media page and talking about me and my parents got into a fight today. Or me and my boyfriend broke up today. And all of the emotional stuff that gets posted on social media by our children gets seen by a trafficker. That's how they're targeted online. Another one is homelessness. A lot of youth in our state are homeless. They don't have anywhere to go, and they feel like they can't go back home. So they're a prime candidate for traffickers to target. Special mark tattoos or brandings. A lot of times traffickers will brand, drug dealers do this too, they will brand their property. And they consider children, men and women, their property. So they will put specialized tattoos on them, like a crown with some initials on the shoulder or on the back. Or I went to a cover up with a girl and she had painting on her hand with a huge dollar sign. And that was the way that she was branded to that particular trafficker. So that if anybody else came in her path, anybody tried to help her or anything like that, she was already just tethered to this individual and wouldn't leave, or another trafficker wouldn't mess with her because they saw that branding. And so particular tattoos like that are ones to watch out for. If your child is under the age of 18 in the state of Georgia, they cannot get a tattoo even with your consent. So if they come home with a tattoo, there's probably a conversation that needs to happen, right? New material goods. If you yourself as a parent cannot afford a Gucci handbag and your child walks in with a Gucci handbag, again, there's another conversation that needs to be had, right? If you can't or you don't want to put Jordans on your kid's feet, but they come home with $400 Jordans, right? They're getting the money from somewhere, they're getting the goods from somewhere, and typically it is from an older boyfriend who is trying to romance them, trying to buy them gifts, trying to lure them away from the home, so that when you guys don't have the conversation or you guys get into an argument, then your kid goes and runs into their arms. Another one is a sudden change in appearance or behavior. If you have a straight A student, and all of a sudden they're flunking out and you can't figure out why, and they won't talk to you, a counselor at school would be a great option, but these are just some of the signs to be looking for in your children and for the kids in the room, in your friends, because you see something before their parents see something. You see something in your friend and they may disclose something to you and you may not know what to do with it. And what you should do is go to a trusted adult, right? Go to the counselor in your school if you're not comfortable going to your parents. If the conversation's not being had in the home or you just don't know what to say or you're afraid, right? But always go and talk to someone because you could help save their life. Another one is and this is happening a lot on TikTok, is a sexually explicit online presence where kids are sending nudes, they're posting half-naked videos on TikTok or Snapchat because the photos disappear. But you can screenshot a message on Snapchat. And you can take that screenshot and post it again and again and again everywhere online so that people can see it. And the thing that I want every child in the room to know is that that never goes away. It is there permanently. You cannot scrub it off the internet. No matter how much money you pay somebody or how tech savvy you are, that photo is in thousands of places on the internet. And if it's got your face in it or your body in it, know that someone is using it for purposes that are not appropriate. And so it's best not to have those online presents that are showing you half naked in a bikini that, is like a thong bikini, right? Because I know those are popular right now. Or, don't have a shirt on and you're showing a bra, or guys, if you're shirtless and showing your undercut belly there. Those kind of things are very inappropriate and people will take those pictures and they will use them on places like porn sites and things like that. Another one that's a really hard topic for most people to talk about is a history of sexual abuse. Most kids who end up running away, chronic homelessness, or end up in trafficking situations were sexually abused as a child. And oftentimes that sexual abuse is not discussed in the home, it's not dealt with, it's, this may happen here, but we don't talk about it here, and it's kind of swept under the rug. Well, the issue then becomes is that child doesn't get healing and help for that sexual abuse that happened. And usually it's by a family member, so they don't trust family members anymore. So they are a prime target for a trafficker, and they will turn to that trafficker, they will turn to that person romancing them a lot faster than they will a parent who has not had the conversation about their sexual abuse, or who has not had the conversation about trafficking and grooming and online presence. And then substance abuse is a big one. There are a lot of kids overdosing of fentanyl. There are a lot of kids who are getting high on pills out of their parents' cabinet. And when they can't get enough from their parents, when their parents aren't looking, they will turn to the streets and get it there. And so it's really important to have the conversation with your kids too about substance abuse. What is fentanyl? What is heroin? What is cocaine? What is methamphetamines? What are these candies that are being passed around that are laced with fentanyl? How do you stay away from that? And how do you come talk to a parent when you are experiencing that and you know somebody that is? And then the last thing is we have, like I said, I was in the school yesterday talking to kids. We have Youth Leadership Academy. It is a 7-week course where we help kids understand what leadership is, what stewardship is, what is grooming, what does that look like, what's sextortion. I was just teaching a class yesterday how passing photos from one phone to another when you're a minor that are sexually explicit is child pornography, and you can be arrested for it. But a lot of kids are doing it because they don't know that. And so we have those kind of conversations in the classroom to help children understand that they are all leaders in this community. So every time that they engage with another youth, they are being a leader in some form or fashion. So we really want to teach them how to be positive leaders in the community. And then this program is available to all schools. So we can come into the school. We have trained facilitators that are mandated reporters in the state of Georgia who have gone through background checks and really get to come into the school and just be a positive role model for your children. Thank you.
Hey everybody, so my name is Janice Johnson. I am a survivor of sex trafficking, and I have been out of the life now for going on 8 years. I want to just preface before I start telling my story, what I don't want to happen tonight is I don't want you to compare yourself to my story. I don't want you to look at it as, oh, that can never happen to me, or I didn't experience childhood sexual abuse, so I'm not vulnerable. Because if you go into it with that type of mindset, and you leave here with that, you're going to continue to be in the community and you're going to be unsafe, right? Because you believe it can't happen to you. And I'm here to tell you that, this is my story. This is not every trafficking experience. This is just my experience. And I do work with victims on a day-to-day basis, and every person's story is different. So this is just my story. I want you to recognize the red flags, the vulnerabilities, the parts that people play, and just take it as information and awareness, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to bring awareness to this horrible, horrific issue that is plaguing our country right now and our youth, because in the classrooms all over the United States are future traffickers, future victims, future buyers, but also future abolitionists. And we believe that passing this information down to you guys will raise up a generation where this stops and it doesn't continue to happen anymore. So with saying that, I will start, and just as Faith has said, it really hit home for me because I thought I was going to have to talk more about this, but when she was referencing that a lot of youth that are vulnerable to being trafficked have unresolved childhood sexual trauma. Well, that was me. I grew up in a home. My mother and father, I lived in Central Florida. I'm from Orlando. And my parents were, I guess to the outside world, they were this
couple that, went to church and they were just great and they loved each other. And so to the community, that's what they came off as, but really behind closed doors, my father was a very emotional, physical, and violent man towards my mother. So that one place, my safe haven, which is my home, which I'm sure you students would say this too, like your home is your safe haven. You know that when you're home, you're safe, right? So imagine a child not feeling that. And so from a very young age, I was riddled with anxiety. I was living in a constant state of just waiting for the next, catastrophic event to happen, the next, beating that my mom would go through. And so I lived like that for a very long time. And once a child goes through that type of trauma, it affects them developmentally as well, right? And that now became the lens that I saw the world through and acted in, thought, motive, and deed. And I started acting out, I want to say when I hit middle school, very violently. And my mother, just didn't really do anything about it. My parents ended up finally divorcing, but after my parents divorced, my mother just kind of mentally checked out and she just wasn't there anymore. So any type of security or guidance, I didn't have that. And because my mother was just not there mentally and she just, sort of checked out, that opened the door for people to come into my home and do some unspeakable acts, things that shouldn't be done to a child. And that affected me tremendously. I became somebody who, like I said, was acting out in anger. I was in school suspension a lot. I was getting in trouble. I was fighting because I didn't know how to process the trauma that had happened to me in a healthy way, right? Like something that happens to someone sexually, when they're sexually abused, like they need to go to counseling. They need extensive therapy, right? That person needs to be prosecuted by the law for the crime that they had committed. And none of that happened. So here I am, a child, dealing with this on my own. And of course, I'm acting out in so many other ways. I think due to the fact that my father, wasn't there in any type of male role model that I had it wasn't healthy, right? My dad, like I said, he was abusive, so at a very young age, like that's what love looked like to me. And so when I do talk with parents, I just want to remind them, like what you are portraying to your children in your marriage or in your relationships or your conflict resolution or, everything you do, your kids are watching, right? And so it's really important to portray, what you want to instill in them and what you want them to see. And I'm really big on that now, as a mother. But so, fast forwarding, going into high school, I was, like I said, in and out of trouble. I started getting arrested. I started really craving like this social status, like not my personality, my popularity, like it meant everything to me. Like I wanted to be popular in school and I was willing to do whatever it took to get that because when I was able to obtain that, I felt accepted for the first time in my life. But when I was preparing for this, because I don't get to speak to the youth often, when I was preparing for this, I asked myself, like, what would be one thing that I could go back and tell me when I was in high school to possibly like deter me from going down the path that I went? And the only thing that I can really come up with is friends don't give you drugs. Friends don't talk you into lying or stealing. Friends don't talk you into having sex. Boyfriends too. Like men that really love you, that is not a top priority. And so I just really want to say that to you. And my social status and my popularity, as soon as I left high school, it didn't come with me. It meant nothing. It means nothing today. So I really want to, and I know it's hard to like see that while you're in high school right now. Like this is just it. And your world is consumed in this, school bubble. But I mean, there's so much more out there. And I literally talked to nobody I went to high school with. Not saying that that's going to be your case, because I know people have, lifelong friendships, from high school, but just that's what the norm is. So I get to high school. I started, I'm still going through life like with this shame and this guilt that I feel from this unresolved sexual abuse that I endured as a child. And it's almost like, I feel like I'm wearing it on my face, and so I had a hard time, being, I guess, one-on-one with people. I was okay in crowds, and then I went to a party one time and someone gave me cocaine for the first time. And I was like, wow, this is helping me be a person, be a human, being able to deal with the things that are going on the inside. And I did cocaine, and then I got into heavier drugs. And I started doing ecstasy and Special K and all these other, club drugs, because that was what was big back then. And then I got introduced to an older man. And I was 16, and he was 22. And in no way should a 22-year-old man be dating a 16-year-old girl. And to me, I saw it as, oh my gosh, this older guy likes me. All my friends thought I was the coolest person because I had an older boyfriend who could buy us alcohol, who had his own apartment. But that's not what he was. He was somebody who was preying upon me, who was preying upon my vulnerabilities. He was preying upon my need and my desire to be loved and accepted, and almost had an older male role model that I was missing for so long as a child. But I loved this man. I was madly in love with him. And about 6 months into our relationship, and I bucked my parents, like my mom and my dad. I was like, I'm not listening to you. If you don't let me be with him, I'm going to run away. So I basically, manipulated them into allowing me to date him when they should have called the police, like ASAP. So 6 months into dating him, he starts sticking needles into my arms. And before I was 17 years old, I had a full-blown heroin addiction. And I didn't know that I had heroin. I had no idea that heroin had this physical dependence to it. And I was. And I remember the first time that I didn't have my heroin for the day, and I got violently ill. And he told me what was going on, and I was just, I didn't understand, how am I, what do you mean I'm addicted? I'm addicted to heroin? I felt gross, And he told me, he's like, but I know somebody who has some right now, we just don't have any money, but he said if you're willing, to talk. Anyway, long story short, he talked me into having sex with him so we could get some bags of dope. And at first I was like, I'm not doing that. What do you mean? But he used my love for him to his advantage. And he's like, I promise I'll never ask you again, just do it this one time. And that one time turned into I don't know how many times. By the age of 18, I finally got away from him, but I still had this serious heroin addiction. And by this time, I knew what I could do to pay for my habit, right? Anyway, I said, I'm gonna jump, there's a 10-year gap that I'm gonna jump to because I'm short on time. But I was trafficked by different men for over a decade. I was in and out of jail, prison, hospitals, and never was identified. I was just looked at as a prostitute who had a drug addiction. That's all I was. And so when I was told that's what I was, I acted accordingly. And I believed that I would die that way, right? That I was just going to be this prostitute who died with a needle in her arm. However, in 2015, I was rescued from my last trafficker, and I was given a second chance at life. And I went to a program for some on the slide behind, and I started my journey of recovery, and I had to go back and face those unspeakable acts that happened to me as a child, I had to love little Janice, and I had to process all those things, and it was really, really hard. It was really hard to do. And today, somebody who has recovered, I mean, you don't recover, like you're constantly recovering, but somebody who has been out of the life now, I now get to use my experience and turn around and help women who are just coming out of their trafficking situation. I get to go and I get to train law enforcement. I get to go into the courts and train judges and attorneys and public defenders on identification within the criminal justice sector, because that was the area that I flew under the radar in. And I don't want that to happen to anybody. I mean, I definitely don't want that to happen to anyone in this room, because the things that women go through when they're trafficked, it's really hard to come out of that. So I'm hoping that with this awareness event, with the information that you're given, like I said, I don't want you to compare and say, oh, that could never happen to me. Because it can, and it does. And I work with women every day that it has happened to. And so I'm just hoping you leave this place with information and also with some action steps of what you can do in your community, with what you can do in your school, to recognize and see signs and not be afraid to speak up if it's your friend and you know she has an older boyfriend and you know he's asking her to do X, Y, Z or whatever. Care more about that person's safety and their well-being than telling them your friend. Thank you.
I always love to take a step back and do tons of prevention talks. So I get to talk to parents, professionals, our youth. So I teach tons in our high schools. So it's always nice to step back and hear everything from a different perspective. Because when we get stuck in the prevention lens, we want to stop things from happening in the first place. And then when we stop and realize it from a different perspective, it allows us to train in a different way. So really quick, Janice and Faith already touched on these things a good bit. So our risk factors when it comes to youth experiencing trafficking. I don't want you guys to look at this slide and say, oh, good deal, we're not on this slide. We're protected, right? Every risk factor can look different for a specific youth, so please don't take this as a curtain of, oh, we're not experiencing this, so we're safe, right? When I go out to our high schools and I ask our youth, what is a vulnerability? They always say a weakness or something someone can take advantage of, right? Any vulnerability can be a risk factor, right? So that very first vulnerability that we talk about, especially with our youth, is age. So age is just an innate stage of life that we will just go through of being young. Being young is just an added vulnerability that we all will have to go through at some point, right? So our youth are the most at risk for trafficking. Any kind of youth experiencing poverty, a lot of times when we live in different areas, we think, oh, poverty doesn't affect us here. But you'd be really surprised at how well your neighbors uphold an image. So really try and look at the broadness of your community, right? Substance abuse, we talked about that. We talked about the complications with that, mental health issues. And then something I always touch on with our youth when we go into high schools is low self-esteem and social support, right? Not having that community, not having a support system. So we think that's something really small, but it can be a really big risk factor, just depending on the youth. If you have developmental disabilities, any running away or homelessness, please don't write off kids in your community as a delinquent or as a bad kid. Generally, if you look a little deeper, you may find something, and it may not have to be sexual abuse. It may not be these awful things that we talk about or see in the news, but there might be something going on. We have to just take a second to take a look at that. So don't write off what we label as our delinquents, right? So our runaways, homelessness, any previous history of that abuse and neglect, right? And then any type of violence in our community. That will look different depending on a community, but any violence or harsh environments that your youth may be growing up in. And then any previous involvement in the child welfare system. I don't like to focus too much on the risk factors. I am prevention-based, so I love to come at everything with this positive, upbeat attitude. If I didn't work for children's, I don't know what I would be doing because I fit in so well there. We are very cheerful and we try and give this best outlook forward for our communities and our children. So really quick, protective factors, resiliency. If you're not quite sure how to cultivate resiliency in your youth and with your teens, that can be tricky, I completely understand. Please go check out Strong for Life at Children's. Check out their website, they have tons of resources on cultivating resiliency. Safety planning, you guys, if you get any of those pamphlets at the front, so the cell phone agreements, video game agreements, anything like that, that is safety planning. So safety planning is basically just setting up a plan to make sure something doesn't happen, right? And if it does happen, what do we do if it is occurring, right? Planning for something, practicing. Stable housing, right? Maybe having a faith or some type of spirituality. Goals for the future. Plan for the future. Look towards the future. We stick in this 4 years of high school or in middle school. We stick in these years and we think this lasts forever. I promise you it does not. It passes by super quick. And then someone actually told me today, oh, I think you know so-and-so that went to South Effingham High School. And I was like, oh, bless them. I do not want to revisit the behavior that we all did in high school because we think so short-term. And we make these decisions in high school that we look back on, and I'm a professional, and I'm like, ooh, goodness, let's not talk about it. Because we make these short-term decisions and we don't think about the lasting effects, right? Survival or basic life skills. So this looks like mirroring healthy relationships, right? Recognizing what an unhealthy relationship can look like. So establishing those things early on, building those skills, can be monumental for our youth. And different life skills that I'm sure you guys are going to learn through this wonderful organization with Cindy. But moving on, so connected to a community. Please try to make sure that they in some way feel connected to something, right? Connected to something allows for them to not have one person to step in and fill a spot that they're missing. So when they're attached to a community, they have that less likely for that one person to come in and fill that need for love, to fill that need for attention, to feel that need for support and praise and encouragement. Make sure they have that community that stands behind them and does that for them, right? And then last, because I already hit on the healthy, unhealthy, is having one safe, right? One safe, positive adult can make all the difference. One safe, positive adult, just a role model to look up to, right? I'm not sure if you can do one. Really quick, you guys, I do want to talk about internet safety. This is my topic. I can talk about it all day long. We'll do that to you, so we're going to speed race together. Take a breath, because it's a lot. You guys can sign up for an hour and a half presentation that we do, and it's so in-depth. It's a complicated topic. I'm going to try and do it really, really quick. So in 2021, in the US, the internet was the top recruitment tool used by traffickers, including dating sites, chatting, social media, online games, stuff like that, right? The whole works. Trackers entice victims into a false sense of trust by carefully building a rapport and intimacy. Building a rapport is way easier than we think. Wow, you like that video game too? Me too. What's your favorite movie? Oh my gosh, mine too. What's your favorite food? Wow, mine is too. We have so much in common. We should meet up. It happens so quick, especially in an online platform. It's really easy to build a rapport and to fill that need for intimacy, right? A couple examples of that is that fake romantic interest, being overly flattering, right? Being overly complimenting them way too much. And then promises of gifts or any financial assistance, really just any type of promise, right? Doesn't have to be financial, doesn't have to be gifts, really any that type of promise that they're going to fulfill something for them. You can move on to the next one. Apps and video games, this is not an exhaustive list, you guys. This list changes constantly. Apps and video games, constant need for research and approval, right? Please don't get caught up in the day-to-day life of, they asked 4 times to download this video game, and I have sensory overload, and the dishwasher's going, and the stove on, and I'm about to lose my mind. Sure, go ahead and play the video game, I don't care. It's so easy to fall into that. please hold your ground, research that video game, research that social media app or chatting platform before they're allowed to download it, right? You guys can save that for later if you want it. Again, you'll get these slides later. Technology considerations. So a lot of parents ask me, when do you think they should have a phone? Some of these questions are entirely parental or caregiver based. I can't answer some of those questions for you. I can't make those decisions for you guys and for your family. But I want you guys to ask some questions for yourself. What is the purpose? Why are we getting a phone? Why are we getting a video game? Or why are we getting an internet-connected device? Is it for popularity? Is it to fit in? Is it for the fear of not keeping up with their peers? Or is it because you want to be able to allow them the ability to practice safe digital citizenship? Do you want to teach them how to have boundaries? How are we going to do that as a family? It's because I want to check in with them when they get off the school bus. What's that purpose? If the purpose is to keep up with popularity, you should probably wait for another year, or however long you need to, until that need for that popularity isn't there. Usually that's the number one reason, but for parents and maybe for, I need to check in with them, right? This is a great article down in y'all's left-hand corner that goes over all of those questions that you can sit down and ask yourself as a family, because they're family specific. I can't answer those questions for you guys, but I will say that most child protection professionals do recommend waiting until 8th grade for a cell phone and waiting until 16 for social media. I know they're going to be so mad at me. I'm so sorry. You can blame me. I said it, okay? We do recommend that for a reason. There is so many areas for error when it comes to technology. Waiting is not going to harm their outcome. Long-term health, I can promise you that. Go check out that article. Great article. Answer those questions for yourself. 3 questions I want you guys to ask your youth in a digital world. We may have them physically safe, fed, taken care of, in our home, on the couch. You can see them. They're safe, but they have that phone in their pocket, or they have that phone in their hand, or that tablet or video game. We would never let them walk out of the house without asking 3 questions, right? That first one, who are they talking to? Right? Who are you going to be with? Who are you going to hang out with? Where are you going? Right? Where are you going and who's going to be there? Ask the same thing. What are you doing online? Why are you logging into the computer? What are you doing? And that very last one, how long will you be there? Right? We would never say, see you later, have a good night. Nope. We'd say, hey, when are you going to be home? Are you going to be gone for an hour? Are you coming home by curfew? When are you going to be home? I want you guys to ask the same things when it comes to internet safety. It's super important. I'm trying to speed race. Next 3 things. I'll probably skip the next slide because you guys will have access to it. 3 main things that I want you guys to do as parents and caregivers. Please set logical consequences. I will tell you, coming as a healthcare professional and working at a children's healthcare provider, it is so interesting to watch the way that we sometimes parent. And we set these consequences that may not be logical for each child. You will know that best, but please try and be logical in the consequences that we set and be realistic about those consequences that we set. Please be prepared to see or read things that you may not like. The number one instigator in a teen's life is generally their parent, right? At some point, they may get mad at you. At some point, they may trash talk a little bit. My poor mother, I'm sure I did it all the time, and I'm sure I hurt her feelings so many times. I can promise you actually that I did. And I apologize for it all the time now. But be prepared to see those things. In 5 years, they won't mean it. They're just ranting, they're venting, and they tend to do that to their friends. And unfortunately, it's not just the way it used to be, where you said that verbally. It is now printed in text on a comment section somewhere on Instagram. So if you see something that you have a hard time digesting, take a second for yourself, right? Be prepared for that. Be prepared for the difficult conversation that will come from that, okay? And then, like I said, be prepared for those difficult conversations, especially when it comes to sexting or anything like that. They're not being innately bad. They're not. It's not 20 years ago, you guys. They don't know what first, second, and third base is anymore. They explore in the digital world. So if you do find sexting or nudes, please do not make them feel bad about themselves. Please do not get super overheated that our tempers go off the wall and we reprimand them and we throw the book at them, right? Have a conversation, have a good conversation, but make sure that we're being logical with that. If it's too heated, take a break. but we have to have that difficult conversation. Please just make sure that we're not making them feel like they're disgusting about their body, that their bodies are something to be ashamed of, or something that they can't come to you and talk about, right? This slide you guys can look at later. Please set boundaries. Youth need boundaries. They thrive when they have set limits and they have boundaries. They need boundaries. Please set them. Be consistent with those boundaries and those consequences, right? Create family online safety agreements. Please pick those up later, or you can download them in this PDF. They're super important because it sets the ability for them to know the rules, for you to sign off on those rules, but as a family, we have some ground rules in our home, right? They know what the expectations are, you know what the expectations are. Please start those early as possible as you can. Please install those parental controls and monitoring apps. A couple of those, Bark I heard was really great, NetNanny, Web Watcher. You guys can get those later if you need to email me. Set those things up on their phone. I wish I had it in this slide, or I guess I did with the last one. Having technology is not a right, okay? It is a privilege. It is not a right. It is a privilege, right? Safety plan, you guys can read this later, but just remember that it's practicing, right? A couple things, create ahead of time. I wish I could scream that from the rooftops sometimes. Be realistic and be specific. Remember, they need you to be realistic and specific about what you mean and what those consequences are. ID specific people to go to if they need something. We go into high schools and we say, tell a trusted adult, and they all roll their eyes at me. Because nobody tells them what a trusted adult is, right? Talk about what a trusted adult is. They listen to you. They'll never make you do something that you don't want to do. They'll never put you in risky situations, stuff like that. Be specific about what a trusted adult is. Sometimes it's not always family. I'm not sure which one you're on. We can skip that one. Main two things that I want you guys to take away. Please encourage and cultivate healthy behaviors in all relationships. So the relationships in your home, the relationships in their communities, the romantic relationships that they're having, and their friendships. Make sure there's healthy behaviors going on. If there's unhealthy behaviors going on, help them digest that and recognize why it is unhealthy, right? And if you're not quite sure, we have to do some learning ourselves too. Maybe we do some unhealthy behaviors that we don't recognize until we really look at ourselves and we can reevaluate that as a family. Create safe homes and communities. Please keep that open dialogue. This next little slide, I always have to read it. I think it's really important for parents to hear. I would feel more comfortable talking to my parents or guardian at home about these issues if I knew that they wouldn't scream or yell at me for something I'm just learning and new to. I teach thousands of parents about internet safety. Again, hour and 30 minutes long, all the time about internet safety. If we're learning, they're learning. Please show some humility and some grace. Allow them the ability to talk to you about it, right? This is a super quick video, if we have time. It's about 1 minute long, and then I'll pass it off to Jen.
It's almost never obvious, but trafficking is happening around you. And every child is vulnerable, even yours. Even me. Make it okay for me to have a conversation with you. Really try to hear what I'm saying. Tell me that nothing I said will make you love me less. Don't assume I already know that. And realize it might take some time for me to believe it. Learn about my relationships, who I have a crush on, who I talk to online. I want you to care. And help me tell the difference between what's fun and what's sketchy. And if I don't answer, don't take it personally. Don't give up either. Help me connect with other safe people. If you don't take interest, if I don't know you care, then I'll just be silent.
All right. Hey everyone, how you doing out there? Anybody need to take a deep breath?
Yeah, I take a lot of deep breaths at work all the time. It's okay. This is a lot of information, and it's a heavy topic, and so I just want to honor that, and I just want to thank my panelists, and thank you, Janice, for sharing your story. My name is Jennifer. I'm a social worker. I work at a child advocacy center in Atlanta, and I want to tell you a little bit about what that means, but I also want to leave you with a little bit of a sense of hope. And a sense of what you can do, because there's actually a lot of work happening here in the city of Atlanta. All of us here are working to combat this issue, as well as many other organizations. So there's a lot going on here in Georgia, from prevention and education to actually serving victims who've been impacted. Georgia has a statewide response team that I want to make sure that you all know about as well. But before I get into any of that, I do want to highlight a few things that my fellow panelists shared about ways to stay safe, as well as share resources that I use a lot with parents and kids that I talk to in my work. I do a lot of parent training, just to provide a lot of times parents don't know where to start. They don't know language to use. They don't know, how do I talk to my kids about this? So I want to share some of the resources that I use a lot. And I also want to share that April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so the fact that you're all here today to learn about this topic, I give you all credit, because I believe knowledge is power. And the more that you know about this topic, the more you can share with your kids, the more you can be aware of the warning signs, and the more we can work together as a community to prevent child sexual abuse from happening, because as we've learned, the majority of kids who are trafficked have experienced child sexual abuse. So I do believe that prevention is key to all of this. So two things I want to highlight really briefly here. Education on child sexual abuse is critical. I believe Faith talked about that a little bit earlier, like people don't want to talk about that, right? And it's really important. So we have to educate our kids first of all, we have to educate parents about what it is. We know that 70 to 90% of victims of child sex trafficking have histories of child sexual abuse. And so that means if we can prevent child sexual abuse, we can also help prevent child sex trafficking. And the other thing I want to highlight is that talking early and often with our kids about lots of things is really important. It normalizes conversations, and it makes it less weird for everybody, okay? So we have to talk about the things that make us uncomfortable. We have to talk about body safety. Yes, we have to talk about sex. We have to use that word, and we have to talk about what it means. We have to talk about staying safe in relationships. We have to talk about staying safe online. Consent. We have to talk about consent and what does that mean. Social media and how to seek help, right? And a couple of the resources that I have listed up here are some of the ones that I use a lot. The video that you just saw was from an organization called Love 146. I highly recommend it. It's an international organization, but they have a ton of resources on their website. And they have an amazing caregiver toolkit that I highly recommend. So, and I just got an email from them today with 10 free resources for Child Abuse Prevention Month. So if you go to love146.org, that's love and the number 146.org, there's a ton of free resources on there for parents and also for kids on digital safety in some scenarios. So that's my first resource. And then the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, many of you are possibly familiar with that. In addition to having a hotline, they have a program called NetSmarts. And they have, it's on their website, it's a ton of videos, animated videos that you can use with your kids. It runs through scenarios on what would you do if you're in a video gaming app and someone sent you a random chat message. We just heard from Tracy that online is the most common way that traffickers are getting to our kids, right, these days. So we have to practice with our kids and give them real life scenarios for them to be prepared, right? So NetSmarts for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I want you all to check that out. And then the last one is the National Center for Child Traumatic Stress. NCTSN, another free website and resource, a ton of fact sheets, webinars, curriculums, you name it. The NCTSN has a whole bunch of things on their website, including a whole section on child sex trafficking. And there's a handout out in the hallway that just was released in 2022 called Child Sex Trafficking, What You Might Not Know. So those are some of the resources I want to share. The other thing I want to say is that y'all have to look out for each other, right? We've heard that a lot. Friends, kids, look out for each other. Look out for your buddies. Like, you heard Janice's story, right? Like, find out who they're hanging out with. Like, let them know that that older person that's trying to befriend them maybe isn't so cool after all. Let them know, maybe question and think about what you're posting online, right? And parents, make it okay for your kids to talk to you. You just saw that video, right? Make it okay. Don't get upset. You might feel some kind of way inside, and that's okay, right? And talk to somebody about that, but make it okay for your kids to come talk to you. And if you feel like your parents are not the person that you want to talk to, find someone at school, find someone at your church, find someone else that you can talk to. I work with kids all the time, and they often share that they felt trapped and like they didn't know who to turn to for help. So find someone you can talk to. That's the best advice that I can give you all. All right. So it's a little bit of my soapbox for today on prevention. I'm going to continue on with my mission of helping you feel empowered and giving you some action. Go ahead, thank you. I want to talk about the response here in Georgia and services and supports that are in place for a child who may be experiencing child sex trafficking. And at the heart of the response for child abuse and exploitation in all states in the country is the Child Advocacy Center. And I work at a Child Advocacy Center, as does Tracy. There are over 1,000 child advocacy centers in the country, and Georgia has right around 50. The Children's Advocacy Centers of Georgia oversees all 50 child advocacy centers in the state, okay? They've been providing services to victims of child sexual abuse, physical abuse, and also child sex trafficking since the 1980s. Some of the services that we provide are listed on the screen. If you could go back one more, there you go. So forensic interviews, most importantly, when a child has experienced child sexual abuse or exploitation, that's a crime. As you heard Janice talk about, a crime has been committed, and that child needs to be talked to by somebody in law enforcement so we can find out what has happened. So that's just one example of a role a child advocacy center can play. We also provide therapy services. You heard Janice talk about that as well. I'm not going to get into all of that, but I just share all of that to say that the child advocacy centers here in Georgia are resources for you. And as a result, I'll share, in Atlanta, we have several CACs, but because we're a large city, we have several. We have my organization, the Georgia Center for Child Advocacy, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, but in Cobb County, you have a child advocacy center called Safe Path. So have you ever heard of Safe Path? Anybody know what I'm talking about? A few hands. It's on Whitlock Avenue, over by Marietta High School. That is the child advocacy center that serves your county. So I want you to know that they're a resource for you. There's several other CACs kind of in the surrounding area, but Safe Path is a resource for your community, and there's someone that you can reach out to if you or your family or your child is experiencing child sexual abuse or exploitation. Okay, so I want to talk about why child advocacy centers are so important. The Child Advocacy Center model aims to reduce re-traumatizing the child, re-traumatizing child abuse and sex trafficking victims by bringing all the players together. You can imagine that your child has experienced something like this. It's very complicated. It's overwhelming for everybody, right? So not only is your child dealing with the trauma of what's happened, the shame, the stigma, fear, is anyone going to believe them? You're dealing with all of those things as well. There's law enforcement involved, there's attorneys involved, there's possibly medical folks involved. So the Child Advocacy Center is at the heart of sort of coordinating all of that and really working to protect the child. That is our overall goal, is to protect the child. In October 2020, the Children's Advocacy Centers of Georgia became the statewide response provider for child sex trafficking cases. So that response is called the CSEC response team, the Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children. It's a lot of words, the CSEC response team. So I want you to all know about this because this is a resource for you. And there is actually a metro coordinator right here located in Cobb County, and her information is listed on this slide. Her name is Kristen Sears, and she serves all of the cases that are referred to Cobb County. So her contact info is listed on here. There's also a handout outside in the hallway with her information listed on it. And I've got the Cobb County Child Advocacy Center info listed on here as well. Okay, next slide. I'm trying to hurry here, you guys, because I know you're trying to get out of here. I want to talk a little bit about the CSEC response team and who they served and the some of their data that they've collected over the last couple of years. Their mission is to serve as a central point of contact for victims of child sex trafficking and all of the agencies that support them for a more coordinated and effective system response. So I'm sharing some of this data on behalf of their team because I think it's helpful for us to understand that this is an issue that does happen in our community. We've talked about this a lot. We often think, well, this doesn't happen here, it happens in other countries, it definitely doesn't happen in my community, right? You can see, if you look at this map, this is from 2022, y'all, this is from last year. Almost every single county is represented on this map, right? Every single county that has a blue dot is where a referral was received from the CSEC response team. So, almost every county on here. If you look at that, you can see this is not an Atlanta problem, right? This is a state of Georgia problem. And if you look at the top 5 counties that are listed in terms of the number of referrals received, you'll see that Cobb County is listed as number 5. And I'm not saying this to freak you guys out. I'm saying this because this is real data, and these are the real numbers that we're seeing here in Georgia. So, some overall data from 2022, the CSEC response team served 772 youth across the entire state of Georgia. They received 213 hotline calls, 574 web referrals, and the average age of the youth that was served was 14 years old. Average age, 14 years old, okay? That's what we're talking about here. Mostly female identifying victims. However, we know that there are male victims, mostly that go under-identified for a lot of reasons, which I don't have time to get into. And if we look at Cobb County data, which is where we are right now, from the last 2 years, so 2021 to 2022, 75 referrals came from Cobb County. This is referrals for child sex trafficking, right? 75 referrals. They served 64 youth. The majority of referrals were for technology-facilitated trafficking, just like Tracy was talking about. Technology-facilitated means that their trafficker located them, befriended them on a technology device, through an app, dating site, whatever, social media, okay? So this is just a snapshot, right? This is what we know. These are the numbers that we know. These are the numbers that were called into a hotline, okay? So, okay, go ahead, next slide. So I want you all to know what you can do if you do have concerns that you or someone you know are in trouble and need help. It can be really overwhelming. I'm throwing a lot of information at you really, really fast. And I think the first thing I want you all to remember that it's not your job to decide whether or not someone is being trafficked, okay? We're not trying to put anyone in danger. It's not your job to decide. If you have suspicion or you suspect something might be going on based upon the information you've learned here today or based upon something that someone's reporting to you, there are 3 places for you to make a report. The first one is law enforcement, okay? You can call 911 and make that report. You can contact your local law enforcement if you have a local law enforcement number that's not 911. Sometimes in smaller communities, people are familiar with like their detectives and things like that. Contact your law enforcement. That's the first point of contact. The CSEC response team has a 24-hour hotline for the state of Georgia. They operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This hotline provides referrals and victim assistance and also information to law enforcement regarding the safe rescue of victims. So that you can also make a report there. And then lastly, you may need to make a report to the Division of Family and Children Services, also known as DFACS. That situation is going to depend. Child sex trafficking is a form of child abuse, rather. But not all cases are gonna need to be reported to DFAC. So my first 2 points of action really are to call law enforcement, to start there, and then call the statewide human trafficking hotline. That would be my recommendation. So all these numbers are going to be listed on a handout for all of you, so we'll make sure you get all of that. I also have outside in the hallway, if anything that I've said or we've said is of interest to you, there are some free trainings that are being offered through my organization through the end of the month because it is Child Abuse Prevention Month. We're offering a free training every day in the month of April, Monday through Friday. So there's actually a couple coming up that I thought might be of interest to you around internet safety. There are 2 CSEC awareness trainings happening before the end of the month, and then there's also one on child sexual abuse prevention. So I have some calendars with all these training events listed outside for all of you to check out. And then lastly, all of the hotline numbers are listed. Here's some national and state hotlines. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the statewide CSEC response team are listed on our resource list. And then lastly, all of our information and our organizations are listed here with the exception of Cindy. I'm going to turn it back to you, and she's going to talk about To My Place before we wrap it up.
Okay, thank you for staying for this. To My Place is a nonprofit. We're in Roswell, and we work with teenagers, which I had said at the beginning. Our job is to educate and make them aware of what's going on and prevent them from whatever we can and help them navigate through their lives that they have right now. I think the most important thing for all of us to know, think, and do is to listen to our kids. We have to listen. We're used to responding, and we're used to getting angry or them getting angry with us. And if we just listen, they may be more open. I think several of us had said on the panel that if your parent is not that person, you need to find a safe person. An aunt, an uncle, a friend, another friend of yours' parent. But find someone that you can talk to and they will hear you. Go ahead.
So, for the sake of time, I know that we've gone pretty long. If you do have any additional questions, please feel free to come up and speak to any members of our panel. We'll just have you guys kind of line up down here if you're okay with that for maybe 10 minutes or so. And obviously, grab some of the materials. On this slideshow, there were some of the slides from Tracy's talk in the little lower left-hand corner that if you click on it, it takes you to some really great resources. So I just wanted to get and point that out to you. So but before we leave, I know some of our students are probably anxious to get their name hopefully drawn for a gift card. So we'll let Ms. Moore